Hey folks, I'm Vasel,
Jason Levine.
Today we're taking a look at Through the Ages, a new story of civilization. This is, I think, the third edition of Through the Ages.
Fourth.
Okay, fourth. But this is the first one that they made more changes in this one than any other. They made them in both how they present the game, how it looks with components, and they also made a lot of rules changes, although I don't think anybody will sit there and go, I'd rather play the old one. The rules changes are not that big of a deal, really. If you've never played the game before, I'll give you kind of a quick run through so you can see how the game works, and then we'll tell you what we think. Now, do not try to learn the rules from this video. There are already some excellent overviews and rules explanations of the game, particularly by Paul Grogan on the internet. I just want to give you kind of an overview of what to expect from this game. Now, much of the game is going to be revolving around this culture track here. This is this track right here. And getting the most culture is going to win you the game. There's two parts of the culture track. You have one piece here. This shows how much culture you're going to get every turn. And so as this increases, if this is on 8, for example, that means I'll be getting 8 culture every turn. And then I have the actual culture. There's another track up here. You can see this is the technology track. It has the same thing. There's a certain amount of technology that you'll get per turn. And technology is spent to play a lot of cards into play, particularly technology cards. Finally, there is a war track over here, and this war track is when you have new units, you just adjust your war track, and many times you're going to be fighting other players with different war cards or conflict cards, and you'll need to, just a real quick way to see how strong everybody is. There's also a spot here for events, and there's also a spot out here for tactics cards that you can play. A tactic card is a way for you to get more strength in wars, but once you play a tactic card, you will also place it here in the middle. You put your symbol on it to show that it was initially yours, but other people can use your tactics also. Each player has their own player board, which is this is the way that it would start. You have your government here. The government is important, and the government can change. As a game, here you're a despot, but maybe later on you'll change to a theocracy. There's different kinds of governments, and each government will give you different things. Most notably, these civil actions, these white cubes, and military actions. And you have different actions that you can spend each turn. There's different ways to spend actions, and you'll have this many based on the government that you have. And there's other cards and things that will give you extra actions. For example, if I take this leader, a leader is placed near your board. Joan of Arc, you'll see, gives me an extra military action. And so different things will give you different actions that you can play. There's also, these here are blue things are essentially resources, depending on where they are. If I put them here, they're food. If they're on this one, they are stone that I'll be using to build different things. And then the yellow people are essentially workers. So if there's a yellow worker here, they're a farmer, and they're different things. Over here, I got a philosopher. So some of them are going to start here. There's a warrior. And I'm going to be able to get more as time goes by into my worker pool and send these people up to different spots. But the more workers I have, I'll reveal food, and I'll have to pay that much food per turn, or else I'm going to lose workers. Just like if I have too many of these resources out, there's going to be corruption. There's just too much going on in the empire, and I'll have to put some back based on the highest number that's shown. You'll also notice there's another track here. This is your happiness. Different buildings and different things will give you happiness, and as this moves across, you need to move it across to be able to use those workers. Now, when you place workers on different spots, like for example, if I place a worker here, that's going to increase. It's going to cause my culture I'll get 1 extra culture per turn, and it also increases my happiness. You can only have so many workers on these buildings here. These are civic buildings, and the number you can have is on your governmental card. And each of these guys, agriculture and bronze, when I place a cube here, each turn, these guys are going to be producing food, and these guys are going to be producing stone. Each of these is going to be worth 1 food or 1 stone. As I put these out there, I will be then spending them from those places, but I'm able to upgrade and build new buildings. Like, for example, I can build an iron works here. If I send a worker to an ironworks, ironworks goes over here on the bronze, whenever I put a blue cube up there, that blue cube is worth 2 stone rather than 1. So there's different ways to upgrade the buildings. Now, as I said, each player is going to have a certain number of actions that they're going to take on each turn. At the end of your turn, for each military action you didn't take, you'll draw a military card. Now, these military cards are different things. Some of them are going to be used in combat or when you're fighting over an unexplored territory. Some are cards you'll be able to play against your opponent. Each turn you get a political action, so if I want to play an aggression against somebody else. Some of them are cards where I can upgrade, and for soldiers, or these are tactic cards, so if I have 1 infantry and 1 cavalry, then I get an extra 2 attack. And there's some of them are event cards. You can play an event card as your political action each turn. It gets shuffled into an event deck, and the event cards, whenever you add an event card to the event deck, the previous event deck will reveal one, and everyone has to deal with it. So you can kind of know what events are coming out. You can control what's going to happen in the future, but not exactly. So these are cards from the war deck. You also have cards from the civic deck, and this is really a big part of the game. This line of cards is going to be constantly moving. Whenever one is bought on a player's turn, at the end of the turn, the rest of them are going to shift, but also a certain number are going to be taken off depending on the number of players. So in 4 players, this card. In 2 players, these 3 cards will come off, and so this line is constantly moving. And I said you had a certain number of civic actions you can do. To take a card costs a number of civic actions shown at the bottom. So here it costs 1, while all the way down at the other end of the line you can see they cost 3. And there's all sorts of cards that you can get. When you get a card, you just put it in your hand. But then you're able to play the cards, and different cards have costs. For example, Coat of Walls here gives you another civic action. But this one's going to cost you 6 your technology points. The printing press here is another kind of building that you can put out. Each worker you send there is going to cost 3 stone to put a new worker there, but every worker you put there is going to give you 1 culture and 1 technology per turn. I already mentioned theocracy. There's a new way of government. You can either you can use technology to put this card into play, or you can spend all your remaining actions that you have, or all your actions on your turn, and then you only have to pay 1 technology. So it's kind of like having a revolution. And you can see theocracy gives you 1 extra military action, but it also gives you some happiness and things down here. So different governments will have their benefits and drawbacks. Here's knights. I can put this into play, which gives me another kind of military unit. These are stronger than my regular warriors that I have. There are action cards, which I can take in my hand, and then later on I can play these action cards, again, for another civic action. You can't play them in the same turn that you draw them. Here's a theology. Look, that gives me 2 happiness and a culture point, but it's expensive. Here's swordsmen, which are better than your warriors. Here is a wonder of the world. There's going to be many different wonders of the world in the game. Each of them is going to need to be built in stages, so you'll have to spend a civic action to play 3 stone, then 3 stone, then 3 stone. But once you build it, it gives you a permanent special ability. There are many different leaders in the game, as I mentioned. Here I can put Columbus. As a political action, I can remove him from play to colonize a territory without sacrificing units. And that's one of the things you can do, colonizing territories. Here's another technology, cartography. This gives you +1 on military and +2 when you're fighting over a new land to explore, and then a drama building. Now these are all the things from the first era of the game. There's technically 4 eras of the game. There is an A deck, which is kind of like the starting cards. And then you move into Era 1, then Era 2, and Era 3. And you'll see that the cards get different. So for example, in Era 2, the Eiffel Tower. We have cavalrymen. There is Maximilian Robespierre. We have cannons, organized religion, riflemen, Bach, a new kind of strategy card, the Kremlin, which is one of the wonders of the world, ocean liner service, the justice system, Isaac Newton. So those are some of the cards from deck 2. From deck 3, it gets even more into modern. We have computers, and we have multimedia, and rockets, and movies, and modern infantry, and Bill Gates, and mechanized agriculture, Hollywood, and Charlie Chaplin, and tanks, and Gandhi, and a new government type, democracy, or communism, the internet, and so on and so forth. And so you're going to be playing through these 3 eras, and after you're done with all 3 eras, because the game is going to be determined by these cards that are sliding by, they're going to just keep going through. Whoever has the most here is going to win. And like I said, I didn't cover every rule. There's a certain phase at the end of your turn where you will be scoring your points. You have to deal with corruption. Then your food will produce. Then you have to eat food. Then you'll produce goods. Then you'll draw military cards, reset your actions, and then go to the next phase. You have a lot of different things that you can do on your turn. I didn't go over all of them, but hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of how you play through the ages. Okay, so let's talk about our initial thoughts when we first played Through the Ages a while ago. It came out almost 10 years ago, I think.
More.
About
2000, I want to say 2004, 2005, somewhere around there.
Right, so it's at least 10 years old. It came out in a much smaller box than this, and it was the first I had ever heard of Vlaada Chvátil. This was kind of the game that put him on the map for me. What did you think of it when you first played it?
I loved it. I have the original Czech Games edition, which came with these little glass
Discs.
beads.
Oh,
no,
beads.
It wasn't even. The Eagle edition was with the disc. There was a glass beads edition, the original, and the cards weren't round the corners. They were squared. So the cards were. My cards are a little banged up at this point. The original cards, because they were these square little cards. Then they made the rounded edges with the circles later with the wood, but. I loved it. When I first played it, I loved it. It's in my top 10 of all time, and it's just an amazing game.
Yeah, when I played it, when I first played it, I was like, wow, this game feels exactly like Sid Meier's Civilization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not quite, because the cards and everything, you're not actually like moving figures across a map, which I thought I would miss, but I really didn't. I was sitting there like, ooh, I can work on farms and get food and do lots of people, or I can work on this and get lots of things, or I can work on culture. It felt like there was a lot of, this is a big thing for me, there's a lot of choice in the game, but there's so many good ones. Every time it's your turn, you look at the card and you're like, oh, I want to do all of those.
I know.
And you can't.
No, and you really have to make hard decisions in this game of, do I take this card and do this, or do I take this card and do this? Because cards come away. That the card layout where the cards come and then some cards get flushed away and new cards roll out and the new cards cost more and get cheaper as they go along is one of the greatest mechanisms, I think.
It works really well. One of the things that the game has in it, I think it is good, is in this game there are penalties. You have to feed your people.
Yes.
You have to pay corruption fees, but those penalties are not horrific. You can manage those. Now, you can, if you move too fast and go too far, you can get caught in trouble and such. But it's not one of those games like, oh, no matter what I do, I can't stay ahead. No, you can stay ahead. You can play conservatively and stay ahead, but if you want to win, you got to kind of push maybe that gear a little bit. But don't, I'm a big guy who's like, oh, I hate feeding my people. But in this game, it's not a big deal. It actually makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm producing food to get stuff done. And feeding people is something I do on the side. It's not like a curricula where it's the whole focus of the game. It's like, oh, I gotta get food. And I like that about this.
Yeah, and I mean, this has a good aspect where actually it's, even though it's basically the same, I think the amount of people that you get out is slightly different. We'd have to look at the original game. I think it's a little bit slightly different of how many things are in each column, but they have the same thing where where you start out and you don't have to worry, but then when you get this far, you start having to pay 1 food, pay 2 food, pay 3 food as you get more workers. And as you have more materials, you have to throw back 2 materials, throw back 4 materials, throw back 6. And you really have to be conservative on that. But you could go explore so you could get more materials or get more people, which will then keep your costs low. So exploration is also one of the vital things in this game.
So let's talk about a couple of facets of the game that do. First is the players. Okay, the game plays 2 to 4 players. Now, I'm personally a bigger fan of this game with fewer players. I love it with 2. 3 is pretty good, and I'm not a fan of 4. What about you?
I like it in every number. I think.
But don't you feel like that's much longer and a little bit more chaotic with 4? Because like the card row, you might as well not even look at it because it ain't going to be there until your turn shows up again.
No, because in 4 players, only 1 card wipes out instead of.
True, but people are still buying the cards and taking.
Well, people are buying. Usually, at the end of your turn, you look at the stuff that's at the very end at the 3 row, and you're like, well, these cards are way at the end. they'll probably be the ones that'll be cheap by the time it gets to my turn. And then you can't plan ahead, but you just look at what's there at the time. You look at your action points, and you buy the cards that are what you feel are the best for you. And I don't mind in any. I kind of like the bigger player counts, like the 4-player count, because then in military you kind of hang out in the middle. You don't have to worry about, as long as you're not the lowest or the highest, you kind of hang out in the middle and not have to worry too much about any of the military things.
Well, let's bring it up. You can actually play the game. The game has a variant where you can play without military peacefully, and I would not be opposed to that, although I feel like you would miss part of the game. The military can feel pretty mean at points, but it's something that you can manage. So let's say we're playing a game and Jason's wailing on me military-wise. I can bring it up to meet his level, at least enough, because of the game. This edition actually makes it easier to defend. You can discard cards to any military card to get +1, and so for a military guy to wail on you, he has to be pretty far ahead of you to be sure of victory. So if you're losing military-wise, it's because you're totally ignoring it.
Yes, and something that they changed in this one, which I kind of like. I'm not sure yet how I feel about it, but the tactics cards, it used to be that if you had a tactic card, and that tactics card's kind of a formation where you have, I have three soldiers, which now gives me the extra plus for the tactic. Before, you would just play it yourself. Now, if there's a tactics card, you play it to the middle, and other people can share in your tactics card.
For one turn, you have it yourself, and then it goes to everybody.
So the fact that other people can share into it, they have to pay a little more to share into it, but they can share in, means that the military is more balanced. It's not these wild fluctuations where someone's 25 points ahead in military, which I think is a good thing. Now that I think about it, it kind of makes the military where someone can't run away and the military destroy the other players. And they took out the bidding too. Before you would, I'm going to get rid of 10 tokens of my military to do this battle, and now you don't have to worry about getting rid of the military because you're just looking at your military points. You're not doing the bidding, throwing out military, lowering your military down and having to raise it back up. And I think that actually the streamlining of the military is actually a very good addition to the game.
I really like this streamlining of the game. Now what they did in the changes for this one is they changed a few rules, not a lot, but they changed a lot of cards. They really balanced all the card text out, which is fine by me. The rule book is really well done. It's very easy. This is not a super simple game, so you want to make sure you understand everything. However, it pales besides many complex games. But there's still a lot going on in the rule book. Very clearly, they do the 2 rule book thing where they have the rule book that walks you through, then they have the reference guide type thing. I was really impressed with this version. I think it's better in every way. It's more streamlined. It has nicer components. It just looks better.
The cards are, I don't know what size you'd call them, but
they're way better cards.
They're not the teeny tiny cards that they used to be. They're not quite card-sized cards, but they're bigger cards.
Yeah, but they're big enough to actually put cubes on the things rather than where you had the little tiny discs that were...
Yes, and the glass cubes that come with this one are gorgeous. The components are very well done. I don't know about the board. The old board was one board. This is 5 boards that you kind of put together in a big shape. And
I would have just made a big board. I mean, this box is big enough to fit it. Just put a board in.
Yeah, a board would have been better, but I mean, you still have all the tracks. It's just weird that they're all separate now instead of together, but that's just the way it is. But I love the components. I love how even the your constitutional monarchy and all your different governments have, instead of just having the little picture with the little however many red and white circles you have, now you have actual pictures on all the cards too because they're big enough, and it really, really, really adds to the game, I think, as well.
Now, this is not a super short game. The box is 120 minutes plus, and that's pretty, well, I would say for your first game, you're going to be looking at 3 to 4 hours, probably easy, and I would say a lot of games in this are going to turn out to be 3 hours. Maybe once you really know all the cards, you can move faster than that. In the annals of civilization, I mean, a few years ago I played Nations, and I was like, ooh, this game has something to do with it. I've now played Through the Ages again. I haven't played it since I played Nations, and I'll tell you, Through the Ages kicks Nations around the block. It really does. It beats up on I would say this is probably my favorite Civ game. I don't know that I want to play it all the time, and it's, again, I like it best with two, so if I want to play a multiplayer one, I might play the Sid Meier Civ from Fantasy Flight, but this is pretty solid. What's your awesomeness rating for this?
This one, well, this is the first time you guys have seen this yet, but let me just go.
So 30.
Awesomeness rating of 10.
10, okay.
I just had to put up all my hands for this because this is, like I said, it's in my top 10 games of all time, and the new edition streamlines things, but not in one of those ways where it really changed it much, but it changed it just enough and tweaked the rules just enough to actually make it an even better game.
Yeah, I agree. This is very good. I would give it an 8, but that's still very high praise. This is the best version of this so far. I was very glad to play it. It's one of those games that you can lose track of time and everything. You're involved, watching your own civilization, keeping an eye on everyone else's civilization. Pretty cool, and every game's going to play very differently.
Yes, and if you're looking for a Civ game, if you're looking for a good Euro-style Civ game, if any of that, just this is the game. This is one of the best games of all time, and you can't go wrong.
That's Through the Ages, a new story of civilization.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.